Good evening to all the students and faculty members who have joined us today for the today's webinar, and a very good morning to all the guests who have joined from US and Latin America. I am Dr. Shruti Goel, Assistant Professor at Maharaja Agrasen College, University of Delhi. Welcome you all on the behalf of Department of Journalism. I am really privileged and I'm really delighted to introduce our today's keynote speaker, Professor Arvind Singhal. Professor Arvind Singhal is a professor of communication and director of the Social Justice Initiative at the University of Texas. He has around 14 books published and edited under his name and more than 200 peer reviewed essays. His expertise is in diffusion of social innovation, positive deviance approach, organizing for social change, poverty alleviation, and the sustainable development. He has a wide experience, he has wide teaching experience, and he has taught in many international universities like Ohio University, University of Southern California, and the list is big. Absolutely, sir. It's really our privilege and honor to have you as a keynote speaker today, and a very warm welcome to you, sir. Really, we all are eagerly waiting to listen to you, sir. So let's start the session today without wasting any more time.
Thank you, Shruti. It's such a pleasure to join you from the University of Texas at El Paso. What you see behind me are beautiful buildings of the University of Texas. They're all designed like Bhutanese monasteries, and beyond these buildings, you see the city of Ciudad Juarez, the city of Juarez, which is in Mexico. So we are right on the border. Let me also say namaste in COVID-19 times. This is a good way to connect. And of course, all the way from Texas, I also tip my hat. So we are going to be talking about the positive deviance approach to change. And let me see if I can get my share screen to work for you. So if you can see the screen, you can give me a thumbs up. And let me see if I can, yes, okay. So I will, in general, give you a sense about what the positive deviance approach is. I know there are many students of Maharaja Agrasen College, and so they're students of journalism, undergraduates. So I will keep it at a very basic level. And while I talk about the approach, I'll encourage you to think about what implications it has for COVID-19. We will sort of get into that towards the end of the presentation, but I would like for you, I invite you to be thinking about what implications it has for COVID-19. Begin with where one should begin. So a deep gratitude to Monique and Jerry Sternin. They were my, you can say, positive deviance mentors, people who encouraged me. I first met Jerry in 2004 and asked him if I could be his apprentice. Jerry passed away in 2008. I was very fortunate to be in his presence a few times, including working on a few projects with him. And Monique, who lives in the Boston area, has always been very, very generous in sharing with me and with others the insights. The image that you see is perhaps a good visual depiction of positive deviance, but more on it as we proceed. So I'm going to take a sort of a narrative approach to talking about positive deviance. And so I must apologize as an academic not to use PowerPoints. I mean, that is blasphemy, or at least not to use PowerPoint with headings and bullets is blasphemy. I'm going to use PowerPoint, but with some images here. And I want to begin with the story of Maulana Nasiruddin. I almost choke when I talk about Maulana Nasiruddin, given the wisdom he had. And positive deviance really falls in the wisdom tradition. You know, things that only those who have a certain insight can grasp or perceive. So in this story, Hoja Nasiruddin, as teachers are known in Turkey, or Maulana Nasiruddin, um, uh, basically begins the story by going to the top of Mount Everest, and he announces that he is a smuggler, and he issues a challenge to all the customs agents who are living, in the neighborhood in Bhutan, in Nepal, in China, and basically he's saying, "Catch me if you can." So the story begins with Nasiruddin, who's riding a donkey, comes to the border checkpoint with lots of stuff loaded on the donkey, and the customs official who's been challenged basically says, "Mr. Nasiruddin, what do you have?" And Nasiruddin says, "Look." And so the customs official looks, and he looks over and under and on this side, on that side, and he finds nothing of interest. So if you find nothing of interest, what do? Well, you've got to let Nasiruddin go. So off goes Nasiruddin. And he's back the next day riding a donkey with several other donkeys trailing behind, loaded with stuff. And the customs official says, "Today I'm going to nail you, Nasiruddin. What do you have?" And Nasiruddin says, "Well, look." And so, the customs official this time really looks. And he looks over and under and on the right and on the left and, behind the donkey's ears and under the hooves, and he finds nothing of interest. Okay, so what does he do? Well, what can he do? He's got to let Nasiruddin go. You know what happens the next day. Nasiruddin is back. He's riding a donkey. He's a smuggler, of course. So he's got stuff loaded on the donkey with other donkeys behind with even more stuff loaded. And this time the customs official is, "Nasiruddin, today I'm going to get you. What is it that you have?" And he says, "Look." And this time the customs official really looks. He looks over and under and on this side and that side and behind the donkey's ears and under the hooves, and he puts on his X-ray glasses and he administers the sniffing test, and he's unable again this time to find anything of interest. So what does he do? Well, what can he do? He's got to let Nasiruddin go. And so this happens day after day, it happens week after week, it happens month after month, year after year, decade after decade, and the customs official is unable to catch Nasiruddin in an act of wrongdoing. And so the customs official, you can imagine, after decades and decades of failing in his attempts to find Nasiruddin engaged in an act of wrongdoing, finally decides to retire from his work and goes on top of Mount Everest and, with a megaphone announces, "Today I retire from customs checking." And right behind him is Nasiruddin, who says, "In that case, today I retire from smuggling." And it just so happens that they meet perhaps at the college campus of Maharaja Agrasen University, maybe at a Starbucks, and Nasiruddin is in line, and the customs official walks up to him and says, "Nasiruddin, for decades I have spent sleepless nights, and I have wondered, what is it that you've been smuggling? And so please, for the sake of the Lord, tell me, Nasiruddin, what is it that you are smuggling?" "Donkeys," says Nasiruddin. All right, so this is a sort of a quintessential positive deviance story, because the customs official, you can ask the question, why was he not able to see the donkeys? They are not small, and each day, day after day, Nasiruddin would sit on his donkey and bring other donkeys along. Why? And this is a question to answer, and other people have thought about this a great deal and written about it. And this speaks to the notion of trained incapacity. That sometimes we are so well trained in what we do, like customs checking, that we fail to see the obvious that's right in front of our eyes. So the solution to the problem that the customs agent was trying to solve was right in front of his very eyes, but he was unable to see it. And he was unable to see it because he was trained as a customs official, and he was trained not to look for the donkeys. So what the positive deviance approach believes in fundamentally is that the solutions are out there. They exist for any complex problems that we are trying to solve. It's just that we don't have the eyes to see it, and our expertise, our training gets in the way. Okay, so that's sort of the setup for the Nasiruddin story. And extending this thought is the notion that in order to see the donkeys, and it is possible to see them if you are a problem solver, one needs to engage in a few mental somersaults. Now, it's not so easy to do physical somersaults, although maybe there are some of you who can do them. But at least we can do mental somersaults, no? We can have our mind go to places that they haven't been. Let's see. So the purpose of these mental somersaults in the positive deviance approach is to ask an improbable question, a question that has never been posed before. And if one can pose questions in a different way, you can find answers that you otherwise would not have seen. So we are going to engage in three different somersaults. And I have to give you the Surgeon General's warning that when you do these mental somersaults, you can get a little disoriented. So see if you can preserve your sense of balance. Does anybody see anybody whom you recognize in this image? Perhaps some of you do, and if you don't, maybe this will be helpful. So this is a story of Abraham Lincoln. I'll tell you another story of Mother Teresa and another story of Mahatma Gandhi. And so in essence, to understand the key elements of the positive deviance approach, that is how to see the donkeys, let's see if we can engage in these three somersaults by looking at these three people from history who had a very different way of thinking. And there is much to be said about how they thought. And given there is much to be learned from their way of thinking, these stories here may be appropriate. So Mr. Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, the 15th president of the US, he was a rather tall man. In fact, if you counted his stovepipe hat, which you can see him wearing, he was 7 feet 1 inch. His stovepipe hat was about 7 to 8 inches. So he was about 6'4", 6'5", 6 feet. And often when he was in a battlefield or in a hospital visiting with soldiers, as he's doing now, people would be surprised to see how tall he was. I mean, of course, there was no video in those days and a few images of him circulating. So it wasn't unusual for people to walk up to him and ask, oh, Mr. President, you're tall. How tall are you? And when so the question was asked of Mr. Lincoln, Mr. Lincoln, you're tall. How tall are you? And without batting an eyelid, Lincoln said, son, so this was a young soldier who had asked him this question, son, like you, I'm tall enough that my feet reach the ground. Son, like you, I'm tall enough that my feet reach the ground. Now, if I'm asked how tall I am, I'm usually very precise. No, I say I'm 5 feet 8 8 inches and 7/8 inches. No, we are very precise about height, and we tend to fudge a little. And this is the notion of expertise, right? We are very precise with measurement, like a customs official is very precise with the way he custom checks. But to Mr. Lincoln, when he's asked, Mr. Lincoln, how tall are you? Even though he's the president, even though he's the commander-in-chief, he's talking to a soldier, he says, son, like you, tall enough that my feet reach the ground. And what Lincoln is telling us is that expertise, even though you are perceived as being tall, doesn't just lie with the tall person, doesn't just lie with the commander-in-chief, doesn't just lie with the president, that wisdom is distributed. I am on the same common ground as you, and I believe that you have the same wisdom, the same height as me. It's a way of thinking, and this is a way of thinking that we are not used to embrace. So what we learn from Lincoln is the value of distributed wisdom, the value of not looking down on people, the value of the common person on a common ground, and the wisdom that they may have. Okay, moving on. Do you see Mother Teresa? Soumya, Soumya Mishra, give me a thumbs up if you do. All right, okay. The second story, this is the second mental somersault. And Mother Teresa, once when she arrived in Washington, D.C., she was asked by, Mother Teresa once arrived in Washington, D.C., she was met by 1,000 people. She was hoping to only see 2 sisters from the Missionaries of Charity, hoping that they would come to receive her, but there are 1,000 people who have placards. They are sort of, waving at her, and a representative walked up to her and said, Mother, tomorrow we are having a march in Washington against the Vietnam War. Will you march with us? And Mother Teresa pauses, she looks, and she is silent. And so the person asks again, Mother, tomorrow we are having a march in Washington against the Vietnam War. Will you march with us? And she says, my child, if you're going to have a march in Washington against the Vietnam War, I am so sorry, my child. But if you were to choose to have a march in Washington for peace, I will be the first to lead. Now, being against the war, being for peace, is it one and the same thing? It depends on who you are, but certainly in Mother Teresa's mind, they were 2 very different things. So much so that against the war, I'm so sorry, even though there are 1,000 of you who are here who want me to march, but if you choose to have a march for peace, I will be the first to lead. Now, too often as problem solvers, we begin with the problem. No? So you begin by asking the question, what are you up against? You are against, teenage pregnancy, you're against sexual trafficking, you're against racial discrimination. And if you see them as problems, and if you begin by asking what are you up against, then what you're looking at are gaps. So students, when you do your survey work, you are looking at knowledge gaps and attitude gaps and practice gaps. You look at what are the deficits. That's the reason why we do needs assessment. We basically couch our problem solving frame in terms of what we are up against. What Mother Teresa is telling us, Lincoln is telling us, be grounded and believe that the wisdom is distributed, and often it lurks with those whom you least expect. What Mother Teresa is telling us, that if you are a problem solver, you can begin by asking what you're up against, or you could begin by asking what are you for. Instead of focusing on deficits, maybe you can focus on assets. Instead of focusing on what's not working, maybe you can focus on what is working. And if you focus on what is working, you will be at a different place. And this is the lesson that we learn from Mother Teresa. It's a mental somersault. And it is training oneself to, in the midst of adversity, in the midst of war and mayhem, in the midst of mortality and morbidity, as we have the case with COVID-19, looking for life. What is working? And you will be at a different place. Do we see Gandhi? Now, mental somersault 3 with Bapu. And thank you for removing that red. We do have a blue streak, but please let it be. Bapu, no? Father of the Indian nation, Rashtrapita, we called him. And what is interesting about this image is that if you look at the top left corner, Bapu is traveling 3rd class, yeah? And he always traveled 3rd class. You know, he often said that the mission of his life is reduce himself to 0. Lived a life of voluntary simplicity. You know, he was trained as a lawyer, but he lived like a poor man so that he could think and feel like a poor man. And of course, you can go into the salt satyagraha. You know, why salt? Because salt, as his lawyer's training told him, was one commodity that the British government taxed, which had a differential effect on the poorest of the poor. You know? Because salt is one commodity that the poor people need more than the rich. So when he wrote to Lord Irwin as a lawyer and as a brother, he said, "Dear brother, I'm writing to you to repeal the tax on salt." He didn't, the British taxed pretty much everything. But his contention was that salt is not a thing to tax, because by taxing salt, you place a differential burden, a higher burden on the poorest of the poor. And of course, we know about Dandi and so on. So why do you think Gandhi thought about salt? Well, he thought about salt because if you live in Sevagram or in Sabarmati, and if you live and work like a poor man, as he did, and you sweat, you can understand the reality of why salt is an important way to challenge in some ways the British government. So anyway, so here is Bapu traveling 3rd class. And you can imagine, you know, people of my grandfather's generation. I am the 1st generation to be born in free India. I think many of you are here who are 2nd generation, maybe some even 3rd generation, I don't know, to be born in a free India. But my parents were both born pre-independence. And here is the father of the Indian nation traveling 3rd class. So I can imagine my grandfather, if he ever came, if he had darshan of Gandhiji, he would say, "Bapu, why do you travel 3rd class?" Right? I mean, we as a country can do better, right? You should travel 1st class. And Bapu's response whenever he was asked, "Why do you travel 3rd class?" was simply, "I travel 3rd class because, as you know, there is no 4th class. I travel 3rd class because, as you know, there is no 4th class." Now, this is a very different way of thinking. And what Bapu is telling us is that too often as problem solvers, we get very vested in best practices. There's nothing wrong with it. Like there is nothing wrong in marching against the war, and there's nothing wrong in saying I'm 6 feet 4.5 inches tall. What Bapu is saying is that if you, instead of focusing on best practices, begin to ask the question, what's working and what's working for the 4th class, you'll be at a different place. And if you can factor in the sensibilities of the 3rd class or the 4th class in the equation of problem solving, you will begin to see problems in a very different way. Yeah? Okay, so these are the 3 mental somersaults. Again, I apologize for not having these bulleted as PowerPoints, but 3 little stories. Hopefully with the Nasiruddin story, they give you the basic framework of the positive deviance approach. And imagine if as a journalist, you begin to apply these frameworks to problems that you're writing about? You know, are there some people who against all odds, who belong to the fourth class, but who've solved the problem? And this is fundamentally what happened in Vietnam, which is where this positive deviance approach was operationalized, systematized, codified. And this was done by my two mentors, Monique and Jerry Sternin. So let me see if I can bring these three stories together and show you how problems can be solved in ways that they have not been solved before. So the year is 1990, and Vietnam had a big issue with child malnutrition. India, as you know, is a country that has severe malnutrition of children and severe stunting. You know, so these problems still continue to exist and plague us. Well, in Vietnam, 65% of the kids under the age of 5 in 1990 were malnourished. And here's Jerry Sternin. This is a favorite image of mine. The picture was taken by my friend David Gasser, because whenever you sat across from Jerry, he would constantly be doing this flip, you know, like, do the somersault, yeah? Because when you say, this is not working, he'd say, is there somebody who's made it work? And so this was the 180-degree question that Jerry would ask. And in Vietnam, they basically took these three somersaults and asked the following question. And this was a data-driven question. Positive deviance is completely bathed in data. And the question was simply, are there children under the age of 5, the population that you're trying to address, from the poorest of the poor households? This is the Gandhian third class and fourth class, whom you would least expect to be well nourished. Are there children under the age of 5 from very poor rural households that are well nourished? Okay, simple. Mental somersaults, you ask an improbable question which has not been asked. And the answer was, you know, this is of course an improbable, implausible, almost impossible question. This is not like the hypothesis testing we do, regression, you know, you predict and control. You would never predict that children from poor rural households would be well nourished. But when you ask that kind of a question, and they had weighed 3,000 kids in the first 4 communities that they worked with who were under the age of 5, there were only 24 children, 24 out of 3,000 who came from the poorest of the poor families, but who were well nourished. So the donkeys are there. These 24 kids have solved the problem. And they have solved the problem amidst greatest adversity. So you don't need experts from the outside. All you need to do is figure out what the heck they're doing. Because they must be doing something, or the mothers must be doing something, because they are well nourished. That's what the data is saying. So if you look at this question, simple as it looks, and this is a question that journalists should ask, in my opinion, if you are a solution-oriented journalist. We are all in the gloom and doom business of earthquakes and fires and COVID-19s. The very poor rural households is the Gandhi's fourth class. And focusing on children that are well nourished, that's Mother Teresa. What are you for? You are for well nourished children. So then, of course, you ask, what the heck are these families doing? What uncommon practices do they engage in? Because they must be doing something. They don't have access to extra resources. They must be focusing on certain behaviors. And these uncommon practices, hopefully, are practices, given they are the poorest of the poor, that would be accessible to all. So what uncommon practices were self-discovered that were accessible to all? One of the practices amongst these kids who were well nourished, who shouldn't have been, was that their mothers took shakarkandi, but not shakarkandi, not sweet potato, but the leaves of sweet potato plants, and added them to the rice or to the pho, the soup. Now, most of us, I don't know how many of how many of you have eaten shakarkandi ke patte, or the shoots, the greens of sweet potato plants? Or how many of you even seen them? Our mental conception as an expert, when we think of sweet potato, we think of the potato, the sweet potato. We don't think of the greens. And that was precisely the case in Vietnam. Most mothers would take the greens of sweet potato and feed them to the goats and the cows, or use them as compost. In this case, the mothers of these well-nourished kids, poor mothers of these well-nourished kids, were taking the greens and they were adding them to the meal. And then you can put on your expert hat and you say, what is there in sweet potato plants? And well, what's there in sweet potato plants are all the rich minerals that a child needs. Lots of vitamins. You have vitamin A because of beta carotene. You have, calcium, you have magnesium, you have iron, all the micronutrients that your child needs. And the resource is accessible to all, right? Because there's sweet potato plants everywhere. And what's so special about sweet potato? There are carrot greens, and there are radish greens, and there are, you get the idea, okay. Another uncommon practice that was discovered by the respondents was that some of these mothers spent a little extra time in their fields, maybe another minute in their rice fields before coming back home. And then you say, what were they doing in this 1 minute? Well, these mothers, and Vietnam grows 3 crops of rice. They have, they have plenty of rice. Their fields are waterlogged. And if you have waterlogged rice fields, you have a lot of other organic crustacean material. You have teeny tiny shrimps and crabs. You have teeny tiny shellfish. You have little snails. And often these were, well, in Vietnam, these were not considered to be food that you would eat. You would, if you needed to eat shrimps and crabs, you get them from the river or the ocean, not these little teeny tiny shrimps and crabs, because they had a lot of crust. But these mothers would spend that extra half a minute, bend down, pick these up, come home, remove the crust, and now you have some pulp. And that pulp is all protein. And again, this was accessible to all. So they took the wisdom that already existed in these communities and then found a way to amplify it. The interesting thing was when these mothers were asked, how long have you been adding this? Oh, my mother used to do this, and I've been doing this for 10 years. Well, the donkeys have been coming and going for 10 years. It's just that people had never asked this question before, and because they had never asked this question before, they had not found the answer. No? In order to see the donkeys, you ask an improbable question based on data, and then you figure out what the hell they're doing that's uncommon, which clearly helps address the problem. Another behavior that was found, which was uncommon, was that these mothers of these kids who were well nourished actually actively fed them. And this is not normative practice, or it wasn't normative practice in Vietnam. Usually, if a child began to sit, you put a bowl of food in front of it, and the child eats some and, drop some and waste some. But these mothers actually actively fed. It was non-normative. Statistically, this wasn't the norm. This was a positively deviant practice. Deviant because it wasn't the norm. Positive because when you actively feed the child, then you make sure that the last kernel of rice or a green shoot of sweet potato or a little shrimp went into. And if the mothers were working in the fields, they would ask their siblings, ask the siblings of this child to feed the child. So these uncommon practices, they are the Lincolnian distributed wisdom. This wisdom lies with ordinary people who achieve extraordinary results, and they've been doing this for years, as the donkeys have been coming and going for years. So this Vietnam case is well documented. In 7 years, between 1990 and 1997, Vietnam pretty much solved its malnutrition problem, and did so by the wisdom that was discovered by its own people. Now, I'm going to give you some examples now that deal with infection control. I've done some work with HIV, I've done some work with hospital-acquired infections, and maybe this is our move towards trying to see what implications there are with COVID-19, because these are all infectious diseases. So much like the question that was asked in Vietnam, I'm reporting the results of a little study, positive deviance study, in East Java, Indonesia. And the question, and you can see the correspondence with the Vietnam malnutrition case. The question was simply asked, and this was a brothel, a sex establishment, which actually had about 400 commercial sex workers that were working. And the question was, are there commercial sex workers? This is like, are there children under the age of 5? Are there commercial sex workers in this brothel who have been in the trade for at least 5 years, right? Which means they are at high risk, and who average 6 to 7 clients per day. You know, this is Gandhi's 4th class. First of all, you're a commercial sex worker, you're a woman, and you have been in the trade, and you have so many clients, so your risk of being HIV positive, very, very high, right? And that was the problem that they were trying to address. The problem was that not too many women were being tested, and those who were tested, there were very high rates of seroprevalence. So the simple question was, are there commercial sex workers who have been in the trade for 5 years at least, who on average have 6 or 7 clients per day, but who report that they can successfully negotiate condom use, and when they're tested, are HIV free? Now, this is an improbable, implausible question, right? But the answer was yes. Amongst these 400 commercial sex workers, there were a handful who had been in the trade for 10 years and who said that, oh yeah, we are able to successfully negotiate condom use. And oh yeah, yes, we get tested every 6 months, and you know, I'm HIV free. And then again, you ask the question. They're obviously deviants because in a statistical sense, because they are not in a sociological sense. In a statistical sense, they are deviant because they are not the norm. The norm is if you have those behaviors, you are HIV positive. And they're positive, of course, positive in the sense of the desired behaviors, that they remain HIV negative. So then you ask the question, what the heck are they doing? They must be doing something. There must be something that happens behind those 4 walls or under the sheets. And the answer, when they dug, was very simple. These women basically said, you know, we've been through a USAID program, we were trained in condom negotiation. And of course, you begin to talk about the condom right as a client comes in, and you can imagine with the power differentials and the disparities, they are in no real position to negotiate because the client can find somebody who. So these commercial sex workers basically said, we never ever raise the issue of condoms when a client comes in. We know why the client is there, and so we give them what the client wants, and we tease them. They talked a great deal about teasing. He says they are here for an adventure, and we give them an adventure. No? So we rub them here, we rub them there, we tease them, we get them, in their own words, to a point of no return. Now, I don't know what that means, but perhaps some of you do. And you know, then you ask them, how do you know they are at a point of no return? He says, oh yeah, we can sense people's breathing. We know that they are, you know, they're aroused. Ah, okay. So only at that point in time, it's the timing issue, do you bring out a condom. And you don't just bring out a Nirod, you know, an ordinary condom. The man is there and, you know, he believes in his virility, so you play to that. So they may pull out a condom and say, here's a neon condom, and of course, I'd love to see you glow in the dark. And, you know, that speaks to the man in a way that only a commercial sex worker can. They may say, ah, you know, here is a banana flavored condom, and that is what you deserve, mister. You get the idea? They have figured out a way to speak to the man in a way that he understands at a time when he understands. And then, of course, as one dug deeper, you ask them, well, but what if somebody still stays? I don't need a condom. And then they said, oh yeah, if there's somebody who still refuses a condom, we know what to do. Well, what do? You say you hold the condom to them, maybe a banana condom, maybe a neon condom, maybe a pineapple condom, maybe a gulab jamun condom. And you basically say, this is not for me to protect myself, right? I mean, I'm a commercial sex worker, you know that. I've been in the trade for a long time. I have many clients. This is not for me to protect me. This is for you to protect. No, it's not you. This is for you to protect. No, it's not your health. This is for you, and this is the most effective message. This is for you to protect your reputation. This is the positively deviant act. The timing, getting them aroused, speaking to them, and then saying, I'm a commercial sex worker, you're a happily married man, you have 3 kids, and you come here to have fun. If you don't use this, imagine what happens to your reputation. And we all know about reputations, right? You get the idea? So these commercial sex workers had figured out a way to solve this problem. How long have you been doing this? Oh, we've been doing this for decades. Oh my God, the donkeys have been coming and going. We just didn't have the eyes to see it. You get the idea? So we did some work with hospital-acquired infections. This is a project that we did with Jerry and Monique Sturden. It was the first large-scale project implementing positive deviance in 6 US hospitals. And we asked the question, and this is very relevant for the work that COVID-19. We asked the question, are there certain doctors, nurses, transporters, custodians, housekeepers, chaplains who did things which were non-normative? Right? Now, again, this is a question that's not asked. I mean, you'd say, really, a custodian? What would a custodian know, right? A housekeeper, who's taking their, and, or what would a chaplain, a person who goes from room to room with a Bible trying to, And when you ask this kind of a question, you begin to realize there were chaplains indeed who had a Bible, yes, or their Gita, or, their Ramcharitramanas, whatever, but it was in a plastic cover. And they kept alcohol swabs in their pocket. And before they put the Bible on the chest, on the heart of a patient, they would take out an alcohol swab and basically clean, disinfect the Bible. Now they were transporting a little, well, I mean, if you don't do that, then you're transporting a little more than the Word of God, right? Here, you basically prevent the infection. It was not the normal practice, but there were people who were doing it. There was a custodian who took his mop from room to room in a hospital, and you can imagine when you take a mop, the mop becomes a vector of infection transfer, right? But this custodian regularly dipped his mop in Clorox in between his. Now, you would think that would be normal practice. It wasn't, because there's certain germs which you can take care of by soap and water, but there are certain for which you need Clorox. And this person dipped his mop every single time in Clorox before it went on the floor. You find doctors typically in the United States wear long sleeves, wear a white coat, they have a tie, and you can imagine the long coat, the tie, the long sleeves are all vectors of infection transfer. But you do find some doctors who are in half sleeves, no white coat, and these are doctors who, again, their stethoscope, when they put their stethoscope on a patient, they make sure they take the alcohol swab and disinfect the surface. Most doctors don't do that. COVID-19 transmits by touch, or can transmit by touch from one surface to the other, right? And so on. So small little things. We found nurses who would use their knuckle to press the elevator button or to type, if they had to type a few things. And then again, you do a study and you figure out that if you use knuckles instead of your fingertips, your hands as a vector of infection transfer, their capacity to be a vector of transfer is decreased by 90%. So the solutions are there, small little things that people do, which are already solving the problem. It's just that we don't have the eyes to see them. You're with me so far? Moving on. All right. So now here's a wonderful case of PD behavior, positively deviant behavior for COVID-19. I've been following the work of Dr. Ernest Patty. He is an emergency room physician in St. Barnabas Hospital in New York. And with COVID-19, you know, this is what you're in a hazmat, a hazard material outfit, with your mask and your shields. And what does the patient see? Well, that's what they see, right? And you can imagine what it is for patients not to be able to see their doctor, because here is somebody who comforts them, who heals them. And Dr. Patti, because their patients cannot see them and they're there often for days or weeks, you can see in the right image, he is on his lapel wearing a smiling picture of himself. And this is deviant behavior. Now, what does this do? The patient, when Dr. Patti comes to a patient, he points to his picture and the patient sees a smiling picture of a doctor. And research has shown, this work comes out of Ebola in Liberia several years ago, where, again, given you are wearing these kinds of suits, given the patient was losing all sense of connection, when they see the shields and the masks, they can see competence, of course. No, here's a competent doctor who's got, but the connection, the small little connection. And I can give you hundreds of little examples like this, small little things that people are doing, which help them make a connection with the patient and helps the patient connect with the doctor. And it is healing for both of them. I don't know how much you know about the Italian tradition of suspending your cappuccino for someone. This practice started in Napoli decades ago, during the war, especially World War II, and in other times, because Italians have to have their morning espresso or cappuccinos. If you went to a coffee shop, a cafe, you could suspend your cappuccino for somebody else. What does that mean? This basically means you pay for your cappuccino and you say, well, for the next person who doesn't have the ability to pay, I'm going to pay you the price of another cappuccino. You double pay. So that the next person who comes looking for a cappuccino, who doesn't have, in some ways, the capability to buy a cappuccino, may ask, has somebody suspended their cappuccino? And if the answer is yes, then you can get your free cappuccino. Now, this practice in Italy, because Italy, as you know, has been, the northern Italy has been completely ravaged, has made a resurgence. And it's not just for coffee. It is for shopping. So you may buy groceries for $15 and you can say you would like to suspend your shopping for another 10 euros. And so that a person who's not so well to do has the potentiality to come and benefit from your generosity. Many Italians have adopted shops. So what they do is they buy a voucher. They say, okay, I'm going to give you $25, but when your shop opens after COVID-19, you can give me products worth $25 or 25 euros. Okay, so basically what I'm saying in conclusion is that positive deviants exist. They are hidden from plain sight, but they have solved the problem. They have done so without extra resources and usually against all odds, but certainly in a peer group. They can be identified by sieving data through a triple somersault question. Their self-discovered solutions, by definition, are accessible to all. And anybody can do suspended coffee or suspended shopping. Anybody can add a picture of themselves on a mask. And in a world where we are completely obsessed with evidence-based practice, PD or positive deviance represents practice-based evidence. You're looking for that small practice, that variation in practice that makes a difference. And of course, if you are a journalism student, imagine the joy of finding out that practice and writing about it. Because you are looking for life amidst death. You're looking for what is working amidst what you are up against. So Steven Spielberg, I was once in an audience with him. He basically said, the eye behind the camera denies the existence of what it does not see. And we put on these lenses in ways that allows us not to see things because of our training. And if we can, in some ways, expand our vision, begin to see what we don't see by asking these improbable questions using mental somersaults, we will be in a very different place. So I will say thank you. And what I'd like to do, and this is just for the next 5 minutes, is I would like to break you into small breakout rooms. And this is just for the next 5 minutes. And you will be in rooms of 3 or 4 people. And in your room of 3 or 4, you will have 3 or 4 minutes total. So each person only gets a minute, and don't waste time. You, in that 1 minute that you have for yourself, can talk about, if you have a question, you can at least have that question be broached to 3 other people, or if you have a comment, but talk about what this means for you. Yeah. And I'm going to do this. And once we do this, after 3 or 4 minutes, I'll bring you back, and then we'll say our goodbyes. All right. So give me a minute. I'll break you into rooms. I'm going to break you into, we still have 98 participants. Okay, so I'm creating rooms, and you are going to be in it for 4 minutes, and you'll automatically come back. Don't waste time. Discuss what this presentation means for you. And Lydia, yeah, I'm raising my eyes for you. Okay, go.
I was
Absolutely.
actually wondering how this can be effectively used in social media, since we are using social media platforms now very commonly. How that can be used for emotional well-being? I thought I should ask that question to sir. I hope we'll get a chance. So, how was this positive deviance? What is positive deviance to you?
I was really, what really got me was the something that was said about 30 minutes in, and that's coming from a field of it, from the field of education and social work. But if you only focus on best practices and not
Throughout the sessions, that what are the kind of questions we should be asking during this time of COVID-19? Like, what are the different questions we should ask? I could relate with the example of the doctor who puts a nice picture of himself, a smiling picture, while he goes to the patients. So I was just wondering what kind of different questions we could ask during this time. Do you have any idea about it?
What kind of different questions? Well, like he said, simple practices. What could be simple practices that we see day by day?
Hello.
Hi, Bhargavi.
Hi, sir. How are you? Good to see you. Hear you. Oh my God, it was amazing.
So good to see you. I also see my friend Tip. Hi, Tip.
Hi.
And Bobby. Good to see you, Bobby.
Hi, Arvind. Good to see you.
Hey, looking good, Bobby.
Oh, I have the COVID cut.
Okay, let's see. Are we all back? We are.
Yes, sir.
Kind of.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I know the usual way of doing things. The normative way is, okay, we have time for Q&A. And if you have time for question and answer, there's 1 or 2 people who speak, the rest of them. So this was a different way of you engaging with at least a few others. And hopefully everybody had equal opportunity to participate. And were at least able to share your comments but I think I'm going to leave the room open for 2 or 3 comments. Maybe I'll invite a few people whom I know to maybe in 2 or 3 sentences wrap this up. So Bhargavi, let's go to you. In 2 or 3
Sure,
sentences.
sir.
Yes, go ahead. Bhargavi is joining us from Bangalore.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Bhargavi from Jain University. So it's always good to hear Dr. Singhal. In fact, listening to him itself, we get the positive energy. And every time we hear, we understand it from a different perspective. This is what I have felt. Even though he tells the same stories, we look at the stories in a different angle. I don't know. Please correct me if I'm wrong, sir. Isn't it?
Bhargavi, you're always right. And especially when you say such good things, you are extra right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I really appreciate them. And
Thank
sir,
you.
when you allowed us to go to this participant room, some students had some doubt about the Vietnam stories, and I was trying to clarify them. By the time I was able to finish, it was passed out. So I was bringing it to your notice.
Okay, that's good. So the students, if they are enterprising and if they really want to know more about the Vietnam story, you can just Google it.
Yes.
You can self-discover. Just say positive
Yeah.
deviance Vietnam, and you'll find it. In fact, you can
So
even
this is an
Google
information
positive.
for them.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'm gonna go to Analu. Analu from Peru. Are you there, Analu? Yes. Let's have your voice come in from the Peruvian Amazon, just to show how we can connect.
Well, thank you, Arvind. Thank you for the opportunity, and nice to meet you, all of you. I represent an organization, a Peruvian organization based in the Peruvian Amazon. And what this is definitely something that we can bring to the communities that we serve to. This is something that we can see what is working in the community, so how they can be prevented from the COVID, because these are communities that have no resources, have no access to water sanitation, have no access to internet, no access even to food, and to get to a health center, it will take them hours. So what opportunities can we see that actually can serve them to be protected from themselves, to be protected from this terrible virus? And we, as through the use of the radio, we have different ways to address that, and we have done it for over 20 years, and we are honored to continue to do so.
Thank you, Analu. Let's also bring in, how about Jeannie Gutierrez from the Georgia area. Jeannie, would you?
Hi, everyone. No, that was great. Those are some stories that my husband Bobby has told me, and so I learned some things. I think it's very hopeful. I think for us to kind of think about what we do and what others could do in our daily, as we go about our day, that could contribute to thinking about things differently in this whole COVID-19, how we can protect ourselves, but also how we can talk to others who may not believe. Thank you.
Okay, Jeannie, thank you. I think we got it. As you can see, you got a little applause from some of our friends, and that's fine. And Lydia, I think we are going to go to you, my dear friend. I don't know, are you joining from Oxford? You're in England, you're in Northern England?
I'm in the UK. Yes, I'm in York in the UK. So hello, everyone. That was wonderful, Arvind. Our breakout group was very appreciative, partly because of the different perspective. It encourages everybody to think about very normal things that you might not really have ever thought about before. You just assume that some of these things are the case. That's the way the world is. But actually, maybe we can challenge some situations in all forms of, in all areas of our life. And it's up to us to look at our life as well as perceived problems and actually practice this in our normal lives. Practice first the positivity. I always appreciate that about you, Arvind. You always make it seem as though the world has hope and solutions. It's so nice to think that there are these solutions out there. We just have to discover. We just have to do these mental somersaults and we will get to something. We don't need to always be full of depression and gloom about how horrible the world is. We can look at things very differently. So there's the positivity and there's the encouragement to take different perspectives.
Yeah,
And
thank
that
you,
can be
Lydia.
Yes.
Yeah, there's somebody who said to me the other day that we grow in the directions of the questions we ask. And what the positive deviance approach does is it allows us to grow in a direction to look for life amidst this gloom and doom. And that is where our most, that is where we need to grow, not just as human beings. Certainly, if you are a researcher or a practitioner, go to a place where you haven't been. And if you can go to a place where there is life in an area of the world where we constantly, our discourses are laced with the leading causes of death, leading causes of morbidity and mortality. We should ask, where is hope? Where is connection? Where are things working? What are we for? And, and we'll be at a different place. I think we will end with, let's see, a tip. My dear friend from Thailand, Tip, how many years ago was it that you made the mistake of having me direct your PhD dissertation? I don't know, it's been a long time, but I'm so glad you made that mistake and lovely to see you. Tip, yeah, tell us.
I think it's about 12 years ago, Arvind. It's my lucky, not unfortunately, to have you as advisor. So the situation here in Bangkok, Thailand, also today, we just have the new phase that they start to slowly unlock in some activities. So what all your talk today is really focus on what is working. So don't be too depressed or don't be too stressful for what that is really uncertainty. Yeah. So, and the concept of like the cappuccino for someone else, it also happened here in Bangkok as well. When people put all the food, the cloth in the shelf for someone that who can get in and they put back if they have, something like that. So it's really make the situation, it's more positive. Yeah.
Well, it's a pleasure to hear you, Tip. It's a pleasure to see all of you. As I said, I wished I could reach out and shake everybody's hand, people whom I've known for some years and people whom I'm getting to know. I will go ahead and send my PowerPoint presentation to Shruti. And if you need it, you just go ahead and ask me, and it's yours. And I think most of you know how to get in touch with me, either through Shruti or otherwise, and I'm very happy to be in contact. Let this be a continuing conversation. So I will hand it over to you, Shruti, and
right. So let's end the session here, sir. And Professor Singhal, I really appreciate your narrative style of explaining this concept. That actually tells that how people use uncommon strategies to find better solutions, which is quite essential for the development. I really appreciate your way of holding this session, and it is indeed an insightful session full of wisdom and information. So on the behalf of Department of Journalism, Maharaja Agrasen College, I would like to thank you to spare out time for all of us, and I'm hoping to have you in future for such online session. Okay. Thank you once again, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shruti, and thank you all for joining. If you wish, you can unmute your microphones, and I think a cacophony of affirmative voices and greetings would be just fine. And
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Arvind.
So much,
Thank you, Arvind.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Okay, love you all. Bye-bye.